Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense here on YouTube. Today we're going to talk about something that most people never think about. It's called service of process. I'll have more on that in just a moment. So recently, I had a question from a viewer who wanted to know how he served process on someone. So we had to stop and go back a little bit and explain what service of process is really all about. Service of process is a fundamental concept of something called due process of law. And due process begins with notice. Due process depends on notice and an opportunity to be heard. In other words, somebody can't take your money or your property without giving you notice of a claim and an opportunity to be heard on that claim. So service of process is the actual delivery of information to someone about a particular claim, or in the case of a traffic offense, a traffic offense. So what is process? Well, it can be several things. It can be a summons, or it could be a subpoena. A subpoena is a request for information. A summons is a notice to appear. And sometimes a subpoena is a notice to appear if it's a subpoena for something like a ducis tecum deposition, where you're requested to bring your documents and sit for an examination. So that is the actual definition of process, but the service of process is usually affected by individuals who are authorized to serve process. Now, in a lot of state courts, service of process can only be effected through the sheriff. The sheriff of a particular county has to go and deliver to the individual who has been sued or who has been subpoenaed a copy of that process, which is the subpoena or the summons, and if it's a lawsuit summons, a copy of the lawsuit. That information is handed to them physically. Now, it doesn't always have to be handed to them physically. Sometimes it can be handed to a person who is over 15 years of age in the house, as long as the sheriff or whoever is delivering the process makes it clear that this is a lawsuit paper or a subpoena, and it needs to get into the hands of the person who is named in the document. That's how service of process is done in state courts. Usually it's the sheriff. Some states allow for appointment of special process servers. Special process servers are just individuals who have the authority of the court by an appointment letter that says, I appoint Joe Blow to go hand service of process to people. That service of process is effected by the individual in his individual capacity. He doesn't have to carry a badge. He doesn't have to be a sheriff. He can simply walk up and hand someone the paper and say, you've been served. In fact, you often see that in movies where people say, you've been served. But most of the time when service of process occurs, somebody just hands them the document and says, see you later, and lets them figure out what the documents are. That's often a more relevant course for those folks, simply because sometimes when people get sued, they get a little angry about that. Now, in federal court, service of process can occur through a sheriff. It can occur through a United States Marshal. It can occur through an FBI agent or a law enforcement officer, or it can occur through anyone who is over 18 years of age and not related to or a party to the litigation. So, for example, a lawyer might use his 25-year-old nephew to go hand out subpoenas or service of process of lawsuits. And in a federal court, that would be absolutely fine. So the next question is, what happens if you ignore service of process? If you ignore service of process, what will happen, almost invariably, is that you will run afoul of the law. Either a default judgment will be entered against you, or somebody is going to send the sheriff out to pick your behind up and take you into the courthouse where you're going to have to post bond in order to assure that you will show up and give your deposition testimony. Several years ago, we had a situation where people who were in this nursing home or worked in this nursing home were simply refusing to come and testify. So in Missouri, we have this thing called a body attachment, which is basically a sheriff going out and arresting them. And that's what happened. They were arrested, they were made to post bond, and then in order to get their bond money back, they had to sit for their deposition. Sometimes that's an effective way to get people into the chair for a deposition, but it's not usually a very effective way to convince them to give favorable testimony. And indeed, most of those folks who were subpoenaed in that way were somewhat obstreperous in how they dealt with the attorneys trying to get information. So that is the story of service of process. Hopefully that's been helpful or useful information for you. If you found it useful or helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you'd smash that like button for me. And if you haven't already, go over here and press the subscribe button so you can get notified every time we release a video here on this channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on here next time.